Hi, everyone, and welcome to Overdrive session. We know you have a lot of other pre-recorded and live sessions to choose from, and we really appreciate your time. I also wanted to remind you to check out our session resources afterwards. We uploaded the PowerPoint deck you're about to see with all the links and also have contact information for our lead presenters, Todd and Ben. Lastly, we have a little surprise giveaway at the end of the session, so be sure to check it out at the end. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to Todd and Ben.
Good morning. Today's presentation is in regards to digital content, not just for global pandemics. You know, when schools had to shut down in-person learning in the spring of 2020, students and teachers increasingly turned to ebooks and audiobooks to continue learning remotely. Since then, digital has continued to gain momentum as a resource that's easily accessible regardless of where classes are being taken. So today, I'm going to present, I'm one of your presenters. I'm Todd Strickland, I'm an account executive with Overdrive for the Sora reading app. And also introducing Ben Kowalczyk, who is an account manager. Ben, you want to take a second to introduce yourself?
Yeah, as Todd said, I'm an account manager with schools in Ohio, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. I know most of the schools watching this, joining us virtually via this recording, are going to be from Spark. Some may not be, but if you are in Ohio through Spark, I'm your direct point of contact. So I work with schools across those 3 states managing their Sora collection.
Excellent, thank you, Ben. So in our agenda today, we have 3 main proponents of it. So one is we're going to take a dive into why digital is here to stay. And then we're also going to take a look at Sora's supporting role. And then Ben's going to take over at the tail end of the presentation and talk a little bit about funding the digital transition and beyond. So let's get started. So why digital? What's so important about digital? Well, digital provides access anytime, anywhere, on any device. It also supports all learners, the English learner, struggling and dyslexic readers, as well as it builds lifelong skills. So we're looking at deep sustained digital reading, vocabulary development, and note-taking skills. So now we're going to look at the aspect of the planning for digital. So as you see here in the pie chart, you have your pleasure reading. This is going to encourage reading outside the library, choice reading. You have your instructional. This is for folding content into curriculum, and then professional development as well. And it also supports a local content, so you can maximize your student engagement and be your own publisher, as well as a community engagement. And this helps to promote reading culture outside of the school and OER. This enhances and utilizes free resources. So what is Sora? So Sora is the best way for students to access your school's digital content. Sora is a student reading app designed specifically for our K-12 partners who want to bring ebooks and audiobooks into the classroom, library, and home. Sora is a great experience for your students because it allows them to easily browse and borrow titles from your digital collection, all on their favorite device. The app can be downloaded from your mobile app store. Just search for Sora by Overdrive, or you can sign into Sora on any device using your web browser by visiting soraapp.com. We also like to point out there's 2 A's in the web address. The great thing about Sora is that you'll find a unified experience across devices, and your titles will sync between them. With a unified experience, students won't need to learn 2 different interfaces or user experiences for school and personal devices. You can read using the Sora app on a mobile device when out and about, and then pick up where you left off on your web browser at home. So now I'm going to take you to a live demonstration. I'm just going to take a high-level quick walkthrough of some key features that are readily used from students to customize their own experience. So bear with me one moment. So I'm going to take you through a quick little walkthrough of the SOAR user experience and show you how simply and how quickly and easy to access content right away. With a couple taps of the mouse, you're in and able to read a book. So we're going to start by tapping on the Explorer tab, these binoculars down below. This takes you to a section in Sora where you're able to search for different content from audiobooks, ebooks, and narrated follow-alongs. When you're doing your search, you can streamline that search by choosing different preferences, from available books that are available now, as well as different formats. If you're looking for audiobooks specifically or ebooks specifically, the different languages, as well as the audience level as well. And then you would simply hit apply. On the Explore, under the Explore tab, you'll also see any collection. You see here we have our SOAR Sweet Reads. This is a summer collection that we've done the last couple of years. This is free as well, to additional a collection of content to help reading across summertime. So we continue having the students read as well. So let's take a look and find a book. So I'm going to go ahead and type in, I'm going to search by author. You can see here I had some other searches, my most recent searches, and I just did a Judy Blume. So let's just go ahead and do Judy Blume again. Since I searched by author, it's going to pull up all of her content, ebooks and audiobooks. You'll note that it's audiobooks when it's noted by the headphones. So, and if you want to check out any of the content, you simply click on borrow. I have already borrowed the Judy Blume book, Super Fudge, so let's go ahead and open that up. So you can customize your experience for your own liking. With that, what I mean is you can increase your text scale, size, increase or decrease. You can change your lighting for high contrast or low contrast for night reading, as well as it supports open dyslexia. So it's weighted from top to bottom and left to right. SOAR also supports bookmarks. You can see here. To bookmark a page, you simply take your cursor to the upper right corner of the page and tap, and you'll bookmark that page. And as you see here down at the bottom, you'll see the different bookmarks throughout the book, throughout the chapters. And also, I'm going to take on a ride in regards to taking notes and exporting notes as well as defining words. So to define a word, you simply highlight a word that maybe you're having some trouble understanding or what it means. And I'll just do something simple here. Let's just do fudge. Okay. So you take your cursor, highlight the word, and simply click on define. So it gives you a definition of the word. You can also translate this into another language by hitting translate and listen to it spoken in the language of your choice. You're also able to take take notes. So simply highlight the paragraph, and you can use color coding to annotate the paragraph itself, and you can take notes on that too as well. All right. With SOAR, you can also view the content in single page or double page. If you'd like to change it to single page for the e-readers, or for me, I like to my device, I like to have it in single page viewing too. It's all about customization. So now let's take you over to the home page. So clicking on the home tab over here, you'll see on the top of it, it shows you your assignments. Currently, I have an assignment to me. This is a book that's assigned to me. It's a Dare to Lead. So this is a very popular feature where content is assigned to students in the classroom or from the library as well. And then as you scroll down, I can continue reading what I'm reading. It also, on the homepage, you'll see your recent notes and highlights. You can see them all. And you're also able to export that. And then Sora has an algorithm where it's going to see what you've searched for in the past and what you've been reading, and it gives you books that you may like based on those suggestions. Next, let's go and look on your shelf. So under the shelf tab, you'll have all of your content that's on loan, on hold, or your list. As you do your search and explore for additional content, what I like to do is give a thumbs up to a book that maybe I want to read in the future, or a book that I would like to purchase in the future as well, so on the wish list. And then under the history tab, you'll see all of the content that I've borrowed since I've had my Sora account. So next we're going to go to our Me tab, which I like to call our gamification tab. Here you have your avatar. You're able to set up your avatar, any kind of nicknames that you might want for yourself. And then it's under the Me tab, you'll see some insight on data. Data is really important. So this gives you running information in regards to, how many books have you read? The average time spent per book, longest streak, your average time per session. So I know that in general, you want your students to read that 15 to 20 minutes per day, which is very important, for education. Down here, you'll see the achievement badges that you can earn. And the way I like to look at this is a way to help promote reading by setting goals for the student to achieve different badges. There's about 30 of them. You can see here that I've achieved about 8 of the 30. You're also able to add additional libraries. If you have a library card with other libraries outside of where your district is, you're also able to add those libraries there. And under the general settings, you're also able to turn on dyslexic font for the whole entire Sora platform, as well as high contrast again for those night reading sessions. So like I said, I just wanted to give you a quick little overview of how simple and quick and easy it is to actually use Sora, find a book, check it out, and start reading. So now I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. I'm gonna go back to my presentation deck. All right, so let's do a little recap on some of the features that I just demonstrated for you during a demo. So some of the features, well, multilingual interface. It's easy to browse and borrow content. Your in-app definitions, customizable reading settings, your title assignment capabilities, as well as offline access, again, anywhere, anytime, and exportable notes and highlights, as well as connection to the local public library's digital collection. So also talk about the student data. So this gives insight to help prepare any kind of plan of action for those struggling readers, gives you insight on the digital content that's being read and by who. So let's take a look at some of the data points that you have access to. So you're gonna have the students' user IDs, also the date that they first opened a title, the date the title was last opened, the number of sessions, the total time read. There's some additional options available as well. So it saves the data as a timestamp PDF. It also shares the title in Google Classroom. And you can review the assignment details. So here's a sample of some data that was exported. So you see here, the title here was A Long Walk to Water. This is an on-demand class set. There was 41 copies assigned for this class set, and the date that it started, end date, and the format of the book is the ebook. As you look through the student data here, if you take a look at student number 8, you see the first date that this A Long Walk to Water was actually open. That's January 12th, and the last date on February 8th. And you see the total reading sessions of 7, total time read 19 minutes, and the furthest progression 100%. So they completed this book in 19 minutes. So this gives you an indication of, this is also has an indication of a red flag here. You really think they read that the whole entire book in 19 minutes. So it gives you better insight on data to each student as well. So what does the access look like? So everything's streamlined, right? So Everything's streamlined through one user interface, multiple collections on one app for the public library, to the individual school collection, the district collection, all through Spark Shared Collection on the Sora app. So that is going to conclude my portion of the presentation this morning. I'm going to hand it off to Ben Kowalczyk, who's going to talk more about funding and how that is taken care of. Ben, take it away.
Thanks for that introduction, Todd, and thanks for going through an explanation of Sora. So now we're going to talk about funding. So we talked about the uses of Sora, how it relates to your digital library, your classroom, perhaps PD. A lot of different uses for this application. So now we're going to talk about money. Essentially, how do you fund something like this? A lot of you have Sora currently, but also there's always that question of, where is the money going to come from? But before we get into that, I wanted to show you guys two numbers. So the number 9 and the number 193. So I know we're not live, but just take a second to think about how these numbers could relate to each other. Just imagine Jeopardy music playing, and okay. So both of these numbers stand for billions of dollars. So these represent money for your district. According to a recent Simba information report, instructional materials for the publishing industry for the pre-K through 12 market generated just under $9 billion in 2019. So this included everything: textbooks, courseware, tests, trade books for required reading. So now, with the influx of funding since COVID, this money has exponentially increased. The most recent bill was the American Rescue Plan. This was $170 billion total. $126 billion of that was dedicated to K through 12. This is on top of the original CARES Act, which was $13 billion, and then also $54 billion from the December package. So this, in turn, totaled $193 billion extra dollars for the education sector of our country. So with this money, this is the largest ever one-time federal investment in education in the country's history. A note about this funding, so particularly ARPA, the American Rescue Plan. So 20% of this $126 billion must be used to address unfinished learning. So that's a note that we'll kind of get into the significance of that also. So now, where does money come from? We talked about for something like this. So in the past, it was the library. The library was the main budget source for digital offerings. And even now, people think of Sora, people think of Overdrive as purely a library application, and that's it. But also there was possibly funding from the English department if you were using Sora for curriculum. Also special education if you were using it for audiobooks or read-alongs. That was a popular use, especially this past year. Possibly funding came from ELL for foreign language texts. Maybe you were lucky enough to receive a mini grant even before COVID, or you got one of those CARES Act mini grants. So that could have been a source of funding. But now with this influx of over $190 billion, just think about how transformational this extra funding can be when we're talking about funding your reading programs. Okay, so ESF. So what are these funds? Essentially, how did we get here is the big question. ESF stands for Education Stabilization Fund. This is the overall umbrella term for all of the money that was set aside for education since the beginning of COVID, since March of 2020. This is made up of 3 parts. So ESSER 1 was part of the CARES Act. This was passed in March of 2020. This was, again, just over $13 billion. The next act was what was part of ESSER 2. This was passed in December of 2020. This was $54 billion. And then the American Rescue Plan, the most recent bill, was passed in March of 2021. So this got us to that $193 billion. ESSER 1 was essentially the main goal of that was just to be a band-aid, to basically stop what was happening, and to try and essentially stop the bleeding of what was going on with schools. ESSER 2 was meant to stabilize, so basically bring us back to normal. So we had finished the school year and started a new one, but realized that more funding was still needed to support our schools. So that's where ESSER 2 came in. ESSER 3, which is going to be ESSER 2 and 3 are going to be the main components that I'll talk about. This was meant for transformational change. So this was meant to get us to a better spot than we were even before COVID, and especially to work on a gap or divide inequity for education. So one of the main questions that might be going through your head as you're listening to this is, how do I know how much my district is getting? So the federal government decided how much each state or SEA is receiving for ESSER. So SEA is State Education Agency. These State Education Agency then assigned eligible funds to each school district or LEA, Local Education Agency. In allocating those funds, the states do have the right to reserve up to 10% to address emergency needs, which Ohio did. Now, these funds are allocated to your districts. It's there, it's sitting, just basically waiting for the district to apply to say how they're going to use those funds. But the districts must apply in order to receive the funds. So it's not like the district is just getting this money and they can spend it. They have to say how they're going to use it. So linked here are the two ESSER applications for 2 and 3. I focused on those two. I'll get into that in a little bit more detail. But basically, this is the bulk of the money that was set aside for schools. It's the bulk of the money that's left over. A note about private schools. Private schools are eligible for these funds, provided they're nonprofit. If they are for-profit, they're not eligible. I know most of you are Spark schools, most of you are public schools, so this doesn't necessarily apply to you, but on the off chance there's any private schools listening, just wanted to make that note also. And then I will go into detail more about this last link here, but we have a webpage that we've created that will provide additional resources to help you have conversations about these ESF funds with your administrators. This also includes case studies, recommended uses, tools to help build a diversity collection. Lots of resources there. This can basically be like your one-stop shop for learning about ESSER funding and getting acclimated with all that information to then bring to your administrator. So now we're about these allotments that I referenced. So these are based on the 2019 Title I Part A allocations. So whatever you guys, your district's got for Title I, this is that kind of percentage was used to determine the amount of funding for these ESSER funds. So right here, this link down here will take you to a Tableau website where you can look up the state that you are from and then look up your specific school district. So I know that Lake Local is part of Spark. If you're here, great. You have this information at the ready for you. So I just went to the site, search by Ohio, search for Lake Local, and I came up with the allotments for ESSER 2 and 3. And so this is a pretty typical breakdown for any school district. The ESSER 3 allocations are going to be basically 2.2 times the amount of the ESSER the ESSER 3 allocations are going to be 2.2 times the amount of the ESSER 2 allocations. So this is a very typical breakdown for ESSER 2 and 3 allocations. For Lake Local, you can see here, they are getting $2.2 million in ESSER 3 and $985,000 for ESSER 2. So these two combined equal roughly $3.1 million. This is an estimate. I have seen other tables out there that have a slightly different estimate, but this is anything you look up is going to be pretty close. I will say a note about finding these resources. Every state kind of organized how to find these resources a little bit differently. Admittedly, Ohio was not the best at organizing these in an easy to find fashion. But through this presentation, we try to do as much homework as we can to provide you with as many applicable links as possible, so that it's easy to find all this stuff just by going through this presentation. And obviously, feel free to reach out to us if you can't find any particular information, or you have any other questions too. So a note about timing. So a lot of you also, the next question might be, how come this is the first time I'm hearing about this? Am I late to the game? So how come you haven't heard about this? A lot of the conversations about these funds are happening behind closed doors. They're happening with, just with administrators, and that's it. Unfortunately, so it might, if you're a librarian or a media specialist, those conversations might not, unfortunately, might not have trickled down to include you guys. So that's why we prepared this presentation, to arm you with this information. Second question, am I late to the game? No, you're not. This is something we were concerned with too when we started looking into this at kind of like the middle of the year. And no, I mean, a lot of schools are just kind of starting to think about how they're going to use these funds. So this table will provide kind of the timeline of usage for these. So if we look at right here, we're at roughly, the end of July-ish already, which is crazy in itself. But you can see here, we are at the start of fiscal year 21-22. And if we go up here to ESSER 1, we can see that ESSER 1 is still applicable to be utilized, but a note about this, most of this has gone to PPE already for most school districts. So your ESSER 1 allocations for the district are probably used up, but you do have until, the districts do have until September 30th of 2022 to obligate these funds. If we keep going up, we get to ESSER 2 and 3 funding. So the deadlines to obligate these funds are 2023 and then 2024 for each of these in September. So a note about this, most schools have not dipped into these ESSER 2 or 3 funds. And the good news is that this is the bulk of the money that's been set aside for your district. And so this accounts for about $180 billion of that 193 that's been set aside. So that's good news. You're not late, and these funds are most likely still very, very available. Also I wanted to kind of define what that word obligate means. So what we found is that obligate simply means you are stating how you're going to use that money. The money hasn't been used yet, but you are stating this is what we want to put these funds towards, and that's it. And so as long as you're obligated by those dates, then you're good to go with those funds. So think about now how much of an impact this $180 billion can have on our education system, and also what should be the focus. This is a lot of money, and so where should this money be focused on for the betterment of our schools, for the betterment of our students? So that's what we're going to talk about for the rest of this portion. So how can ESF money be used? So there's 3 broad uses that directly align with the functionality of SORA. This one, purchasing educational technology, pretty straightforward. So any hardware upgrades, any software upgrades, any broadband connectivity for your school or for your students. I know a lot of schools purchased Wi-Fi upgrades for their schools, or Verizon compatible devices for their schools. So this is where a lot of that money can go towards. But then these other 2, this is a big focus on ethnically diverse populations and achieving equity. So looking at summer learning and supplemental after school programs, and then also addressing learning loss among students. A lot of the verbiage you will see in anything you find about ESSER funding will talk about this terminology, learning loss. So generally, we like to refer to this as interrupted learning. So that is what we'll try and use moving forward. But learning loss, we're just using this as reference to a lot of the other resources you're going to see out there. So increasing summer reading. So starting from right now, at the current pace we are in the year, Summer reading is still a big focus. I know that schools are still kind of planning around this, or they've just started their summer reading program. So how are you going to make sure that students are reading? If we now have all these funds, we better make sure that we're putting them to good use. So you need the data that digital can provide to help address these learning gaps, to make sure students are in fact opening books during summer. Digital is really the only way you'll be able to track this in a non-manual function where you're not relying on self-reporting, you're not relying on reading logs, you're not relying on students being able to keep track of that on their own, or parents keeping track of that and then collecting that at the end of the year and going through it. Digital provides a lot easier way to access that information. Now, looking to the start of the school year, how do we address unfinished or interrupted learning? Remember, 20% of ESSER 3 needs to be used towards this unfinished learning. So a question for all of you to think about: how many of you got all of your textbooks back at the end of last school year? And how many of you got all of your library books back? And were you able to get your PD collections to your teachers? So now we can't think about using digital as or as COVID as a once in a lifetime event. But how do we learn from this to make sure that students and teachers are never without books again when they need them? So think about your transient students that switch schools. They possibly moved house to house during COVID. Their parents might have needed to get a second job. So they were going from their parents' house to their grandma's house to their aunt's house or to their second parent's house. They could have left their devices or their books in certain places. That can still happen moving forward, where they leave books behind. How about these students that prefer to remain remote this coming year? These are questions that need to be still at the forefront as we get into next school year. So now we heard Todd discuss title assignments and class sets, and we're going to go into a little bit about how these function. So now, title assignments, thinking about this application, curriculum funds no longer really need to be spent on a warehouse of books that might go unread. Now the districts can be sure that dollars are going only towards books that their students have borrowed. And these are 3 ways that you can do that. Title assignments are books that are assigned to your students from your digital collection. So these are books that are in the collection already. These would be for those of you that are part of Spark, these would be titles that you have purchased through your Advantage account for your particular district or school. These can be assigned to your students for up to 180 days. Class sets are a digital lending option for titles. Publishers determine this, so not every book is available as a class set, but when you purchase these, they are for a much reduced cost because they're essentially rentals. These are rented for a specific set of students for a specific period of time. So this would be the best use case where you have 30 students, they need you need 30 copies. You're starting this date, you want it to end on this date. All that specific information. On-demand class sets are kind of an added function that can be used for class sets. So this is just a more flexible delivery method for these titles. So these are added to your school's collection for a specific period, and then these copies can all be checked out at the same time by any student. So you don't have to assign it to a specific student. So say that you have a choice read coming up for, say, 1,000 students. That not all 1,000 students are going to read the same book, so you don't need 1,000 copies of 3 different books for the choice read. But we can add those 3 books to your collection. We can set the limit to 1,000 so that 1,000 kids all at once could read it. We know that's not going to happen, but we want that threshold to be there. And then at the end of that session, the school is only paying for the amount of copies checked out. So you have the students have the ability to all read the same book all at the same time. But at the end of the day, it's probably going to come out to like 700 copies of one, 300, 200 of one, and then 100 of another one. So you're only going to be paying for 1,000 checkouts total, not 1,000 copies of each of those books. So this is a very flexible delivery method for these books. So again, you're ensuring that every student has access, but at the same time, you're ensuring that the school is only paying for what is utilized. Now, looking at this application, kind of extrapolating this into other uses. So there's no longer a need to purchase multiple copies of a foreign language book that might only get read by a small population. Speaking about title assignments, class sets, and that on-demand class set model, there's also other cost-effective lending models where you pay per circulation for something like foreign language texts. Now, looking to the future, there is this all-important question about that stems from the very reason why these funds are being made available. How do we increase equity? So how do we best serve underserved populations? You know, COVID really put a magnifying glass on everything, especially in education, but it didn't really affect everyone equally. So now there's an opportunity, thankfully, to change the way we educate. And this is where digital can help. You know, we're not trying to replace physical books, but when thinking about the use of these funds, there's some important questions that should be considered by you or your administrators. So namely, you know, what if you didn't have to wait a week to add a book to your library or to get required reads into the hands of your students? You know, you can have these books digitally in a matter of hours rather than you know, a number of days. I've heard even weeks that libraries were waiting. And you can have these books available in a library that never closes because it's digital. What if you didn't have to worry about students misplacing books because they're available in the cloud and on every device? The student misplaces a phone or tablet, but they might also have a home computer where they can still access that book. What if you can also offer a wide variety of formats that fit the reading preferences of your special needs students through audiobooks, your younger students or students reading below their grade level through read-alongs, or your reluctant readers by giving them the option of a graphic novel versus you know, just a classic novel written in a classic text. And what if the needs and preferences of your ELL or dual language students are met with the ability to change the interface of the language in Sora, as Todd had talked about? And what if those students with reading comprehension issues, they had the ability to change the text or the font of their book to a method that they were most comfortable with in the privacy of their own device? They don't have to go looking for a book that's written this way. They can change that text that everyone else is reading just on their own device without anyone knowing. Also, what if some of the social and emotional diverse needs of students are addressed through no-cost collections, like Sora does, and your summer slide needs are addressed through free summer reading programs, like our partnership with AudioFile Sync and our Sora Sweet Reads collection that's available through towards the end of August. Now, Todd also mentioned Public Library Connect. So what if you're able to utilize funds for a district collection rather than you know, single school collections? One that not only is available in the cloud to all your students, it doesn't matter which building they're in, they're all able to access that same digital collection, but one that can also connect your students directly to the public library, where they can access age-appropriate materials without the need of a library card. In this slide, I'll also provide a link where it'll tell you if your school is connected to Public Library Connect also. Now, this equity question leads me to a story that was shared with me by a teacher of one of my inner city school districts. So not part of Spark, but an urban school district up in Ohio. So they just started service this year. This is the first time for the digital collection, first time the students had devices, first time the students were given the ability to read digitally. She was at a small school in the district. She had a small library at her school, and she said, admittedly, it was not diverse, and she had an extremely diverse student base. So after introducing Sora, she had a student tell her how excited he was to be able to read a book with a picture of someone who looked like him on the digital cover. So not only is she able to provide reading in a fun format, she said, me handing out a book, telling them to open their physical book to a certain page, that's really boring to these kids. But telling them to get out their device that their school gave them, find a digital book that they want to read, and they see a picture of someone that looks like them, like that's a life-changing moment for a student, especially for this one. Reading a lot about this funding, watching a lot of these ed tech webinars about how schools are using these. One of the most common things that came up from people that have worked with federal funding like this is the important question that schools need to ask themselves is, what story do you want to tell? And this story from this district, this was one student from one teacher from one school, but these are the types of stories you'll be able to tell for your entire district if you're utilizing these funds correctly. So now, next steps. So definitely start to devise a plan. So check out this U.S. Department of Education website. This was that Tableau link that was referenced earlier. You can see your district's allocation, and also check out the ALA ARPA state funding guide. This will also give you additional resources as well. Contact us, reach out to Todd or I. We can walk you through the process, kind of talk about your needs, how these funds can be utilized to meet the needs of your district the best way possible. And then also, if there's a question about training, if we're getting teachers involved, or how to introduce this to students, obviously we can help you with that process as well. So next steps from here, definitely visit our ESF webpage linked at the bottom of the screen here. This is going to provide you with that champion toolkit. Again, this is going to provide PowerPoint templates, case studies, a proposal template that we've used with a lot of our schools already. This is going to be great, a great base of information for you to take a look at, and then reach out to us for questions or guidance, or just start having these conversations with your administrators about the best use of these funds. And then also just make sure that you stay connected with us on our various social media platforms. So now those of you that have stayed to the end, congratulations. You have the ability to win this awesome Sora t-shirt from our Overdrive store. So you would just click this or scan this QR code or visit the link below to submit your entry. And then we are going to go through all of those entries within about a week or so after the conference, and then we will contact that lucky winner. So thank you for joining us. And if you have any questions about any of the resources we've gone over, feel free to reach out. These will be linked in the session resources link on the conference webpage also. And then there's also going to be an additional document that I referenced that will list the Spark schools and your public library connection. If you don't know who your which library you're connected to, it'll say that you have a connection, or if you don't, please reach out to me, because we are connected to every public library in the state now, so you should be connected to one. And then also I will list your ESSER 2 and 3 allocations on that webpage also. So listing out the exact number that your district is getting. Again, doing a lot of that homework for you so that we can provide you with the best information possible to move forward, have these important conversations with your administrators. So thanks for watching this recording. And again, feel free to reach out if you have any questions.